Okay, so guys, you should have, once again, make sure you got all your pencils. You have your 4H, your 3B, and your 6B, okay? And then make sure you've got a pink eraser and a kneaded eraser, and then also a scrap piece of paper. Make sure, especially now, guys, that we've got quite a lot of shading done around our eye area, that you're protecting your project by putting that extra piece of paper on top of it so that your arm that you're drawing with isn't rubbing off all that hard work that you've put into it. So, all right, so the very first thing I'm going to do is basically start it off the same way I did the eyes, in the sense that I am going to erase away my guidelines, and I'm also going to erase over the drawing just so that it's really, really light, barely there lines, and then that will also, too, help prevent my nose from looking outlined. So you can also, too, go ahead, since we're going to be working on the cheeks today, too, is get rid of those guidelines all over your cheeks. So I'm using my pink eraser for this. Same thing I did for the eyes. Now I am going to be working on the whole nose, whereas before obviously I just worked on one eye for the demo. I'll be working on the whole nose. I'm going to keep the right side of my face sort of in that contour look so that everybody can see what it looked like before. Okay, so when you're looking at your nose, okay, nose is just it's a funny little feature. The secret to the nose is the shading, really, because the nose is all about form. You don't really have concrete edges that you can really hold on to, except for like down here at the bottom where you have your nostril holes and your nostril edges, but everything else is just all about shading. So you want to make sure that you're really paying attention to those shapes that the values are making on your nose, because again, that's what's going to help shape and form it to your nose. So I'm going to start with my 4H pencil. We've already, because we've worked in the eye area, have already started forming out just basically the top part of the nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and continue basically where I left off with the eyes, and I'm going to continue to sort of bring down the shading from the nose, or from the eye down to the nose, and hopefully start to frame out my final form for this. And I'm just going to make sure I have a good edge to shade with here. Since I am working in a larger area, the shadows are going to be probably a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to start by just kind of crawling my way down from the eyes to the nose. Other people might like to start in other spots, and that's fine. But I do like to say, you know, and this is quite normal, a lot of times when you work on one area, it leads you to another. So I'm even going back still into my eye and just adding some stuff as I'm working on the nose. That's natural. So as I come down here to where like my nostril is, I'm going to, again, try to pay attention to the values that I see and sort of their connection and relationship to the other stuff around it. I'm just going to start initially by making everything pretty light. I'm just mapping out where these values need to be. Now, again, the secret to a lot of this, guys, is that you have to understand and remember that we do not have outlines. So the reason why you see an edge is because you see two contrasting values next to each other. So when you're dealing with an area like your nostril, like the edge of it, whatever you do, don't take your pencil and make an outline right there to show that edge. Look at your nostril and ask yourself what's darker. Is it the nostril itself or the area around it? For me, I can see that the area around it is darker, so that's what I'm going to focus on. And as I build up that value around there, I should see my nostril start to pop up. So I'm just slowly building this up. I build it up pretty slowly just because then that gives me room to kind of make adjustments as I go. I would rather do that than sort of go zip through this real fast and have a lot of things that I need to fix. So I've got it somewhat started there on that side. Now it's totally up to you guys. If you want to, if it feels more natural for you to go ahead and go into your cheeks, you can go ahead and do that too. I might actually just right now, I think I'm going to go ahead and just add a little something here in my cheeks. But I'm going to go ahead and kind of just lay down some basic values here on the cheeks because I think I need it for my nose. So again, before I start, I just want to make sure that my pencil lines have been lightened. Kind of zoom out a little bit more. Now, when you're working on the cheek area, something you need to remember with that is you got your cheekbone right there. So if I were you, go ahead and put your hands just right on top of your cheeks, just right here at the top, okay? And feel it. Feel where that cheekbone is. That cheekbone, it pops out a bit, so it does tend to catch light a lot of times. So you'll notice that once you find that cheekbone, the area under it might be darker, okay? So what you want to do is kind of find where that cheekbone is. And again, it all depends on how the light is hitting you, how your face is turned, all that kind of stuff. But find that cheekbone. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead. What I'm noticing is my cheek is darker under my cheekbone, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of plug that in. And a lot of times you can find your cheekbone too. It basically kind of starts here at your nose and then goes up to your ear. So if you guys look, it's just like this diagonal. It's from your nostril up to your ear. So you can find that there. So that'll help you to kind of carve that out. And again, I'm working with the 4H still. And I'm just going to put a really light layer of 4H here just to get that started. And again, look at how these shadows and these shapes and values are all connected with each other. Now I've got some highlights that are happening right here on my very far left side, so I want to make sure I kind of skip over those so I can keep those light. And again, I'm just looking at the shape that these values are making. So I've got a little bit started there on my cheekbone and my cheeks. I'm not going to move too much further because I want to go back to the nose here. This is causing me to kind of go back up into the eye area. You really want to try and establish that eye socket, this divot that we have in our skull, because that's going to also too help your cheekbone to stand out. Not showing up too much on the screen, but okay. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to continue to kind of work around this edge of my nose, because I don't want to work on the nose quite yet until I've got the edges defined, because if I go to start working on this now, I could lose my edges. So I want to just kind of, I'm going to go ahead and start with my 3B and kind of find some of these areas that need to get a little bit darker. So again, I'm using my 3B now. I'm just building up some of these darks around my nose. All right, so now I think I'm ready to go into the nose. I'm going to go ahead and start with the nostril and kind of work my way over. I'm going to start with my 4H. Make sure I have a nice edge to shade with. And again, if I start to see these edges disappear, which I'm seeing it happen right now, it's basically the drawing's way of telling me I need more contrast between these areas. So if I start to see an edge disappear, I need to go in and kind of darken up some stuff around it. Pop that edge back out. Now, if you did see that bridge between your two nostril holes, check to see, how it looks value-wise. A lot of times I find that this area, which is the underside of my nose, tends to be darker. And as long as I can get that, then I should see the ball of my nose start to pop out after that. And remember, guys, every time there's a form change, there should be a value change. That's something you can always count on happening. And I'm just kind of working back and forth between my 3B and my 4H. And now I'm going to go ahead and work on the nostril hole. Now the nostril hole, a lot of people, I'd say probably the biggest mistake I see a lot of people make with the nostril hole is that they just go in and they make it as dark as they possibly can. Basically create an outline for that shape, fill it in with the darkest value possible. That is not the case, okay? If you do that, it's going to look like you literally have like a shape drawn on top of your face, okay? So what you need to do is think about it. It's basically just like it's like a cave. It's a cave in our head, okay? So when you do this nostril hole, you want to look at it and pay attention to how the value changes. So you'll notice that when you get down here towards the bottom, kind of like this section right here, it'll be lighter, but as that goes back and back into that cave, it's going to get darker. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that my shape is the way that I want it. So I'm going to refine this just a little bit because it just needs some help. And then I'm going to go ahead and start shading. Now when I look at mine, I have no highlights in this. Now, if your light's coming from under you a little bit, you might find some highlights. And when I start here, I'm going to lose this shape just a little bit as I start doing this. So I'm going to start filling this in with just a layer of 4H. Again, you'll see me kind of lose that shape a bit. And then once I get a layer of 4H on there, I'm going to go back to my 3B. And start making it get dark as it gets back there into that back cave. you should start to see that nostril come out. Well, not come out. We really don't want the nostril to come out. And to go in. Just losing some of my edges here. And then there you should have your nostril. Now if you need to, go in there with your 6B if it needs to get darker. And the 3B is not doing it for you. And go in there with just a little bit. There's the nostril. I'm going to go ahead and continue to work on the top of my nose now. So if you guys notice, the way that I did this is I kind of carved out the shape or the form of the nose first by sort of working around the nose. That in turn led me to the cheeks, so that's why this stuff is kind of happening all on the same day. And then once I had the space defined, or the edges of the nose defined, then I could go back in and work on the inside. periodically I'm just kind of going back in and just working on the chin, or not the chin, the cheeks, I'm sorry. So the cheeks, and just kind of building up those values. Right now I'm going through and adding some 3B onto my cheeks, or my cheeks since I'm only working on one. Now up here at the top of your nose, like this area right in between your two eyes, you'll notice, and if you even put your finger, like you could go ahead and just put your finger on top of your nose in that area, so right there in between your eyes, you'll feel that it dips down and dips, so it dips out, comes back out to hit your forehead, and then when you kind of take that finger, roll it down your nose, you feel it kind of stick out again. So this area right here is a little low. So again, look for that for some shadows. I find a lot of times I get like a kind of a shape right in here that helps me to define that little dip that I can feel. And I find too, this is the day that I'm always constantly going back and kind of darkening up this corner of my eye, so that way my nose stands out enough. So if you find yourself doing the same thing, you're not alone. All right, so keep working on your cheeks and your nose area. The next step for us is then going to be to kind of work our way down, dealing with the mouth and the chin. So that will be the next step.